Namaste दोस्तन, आप कैसे हैं? मैं जिंदा हूँ, मैं अच्छा हूँ। आज के लिए भगवान का शुक्र है। क्या आप हिंदी बोलते हैं? मैं सीख रहा हूँ। क्या मैं स्पष्ट बोल रहा हूँ? मुझे आशा है। आपकी सहायता के लिए धन्यवाद। मुझे अभ्यास की ज़रूरत है। मुझे पता यह पागलपन है। मैं यह कर सकता हूँ. I was going to make this video down at the Sydney boardwalk, but it started to rain. ठीक है, मुझे परवाह नहीं है. I'll just film it here. आपकी इंटरेस्ट का शुक्रिया. I wanted to have an open discussion about alphabets. Since I started with English and have been able to absorb and develop so many other languages, I have a lot of unique and useful perspectives in reference to being an English speaker going towards other languages. अंग्रेजी सीखने के लिए धन्यवाद. मैं समझ जाता हूँ. It's important. And one of the ways I'm able to maintain so many languages and develop so many languages is because I use Pinyin to connect them all, since English is my mother tongue. And in many ways, I have very useful perspectives in reference to the authentic prints as well. I recently put out a concept of presenting Hindi mostly in Pinyin form, on the understanding that most Hindi speakers are used to juggling English and Hindi. Hindi does not have any tone markers, and it would be very easy to include Hindi subtitles in Pinyin form with English and Spanish, synchronizing alphabets, and hopefully people that have no responsibility to the Hindi language but are familiar with that alphabet will be able to develop Hindi skills without any pressures of fluency. Hindi is not used the same as English, and it's not as chatty. And you can learn the same 5 phrases to use at a counter, and a Hindi speaker will feel very respected by that and also be very comfortable to speak English with you other than the Hindi that you do know. If you are interested, the 5 phrases I would suggest would be Namaste, Aap kaise hai, Main acha hoon, Dhanyavad, Alvida. And that is, hello, how are you? I'm good, thank you, bye. And in Hindi at a counter, that is really all you need. Obviously, English is much more chatty. So in that, logistically, to develop Hindi skills without fluency can still be very respectful if you have Hindi speakers introduced to your area. Now, back to the alphabet conversation. We still would need to save the Mandarin authentic print. There is a lot of tone markers in Mandarin Pinyin, but they are all very necessary to remain respectful to the Mandarin language. Mandarin is my strongest second language, that's what I just said to you. And when you go to Mandarin authentic print, it's like a relief in a sense. It's official, because Pinyin is not the Mandarin language. It's a representation of the language, so people that have to learn Mandarin or want to learn Mandarin can, through that synchronizing of the alphabets, but personalization with the tone markers. So in that, with the 4 significant languages, we would have English, Spanish, Hindi, and Mandarin subtitles. The only one of those that would really require the authentic print would be Mandarin. However, 普通话人会说英语. Mandarin people speak English, so they are also comfortable with that alphabet to possibly develop Spanish or Hindi skills. Español es difícil para mí. Spanish is easy for me because I started with English. Spanish and English are like best friends. Same alphabet, similar tempo, flexibility, sentence structure. There's really a lot of characteristics similar in those two. Now, in reference to the alphabet, I would like to offer a perspective that is very personal to me, in that this is what I have done, but I'm not saying anybody else has to, but in reference to when I was developing all of those languages through Pinyin, it was actually extremely useful that I learned Mandarin as my first additional language, because I got very comfortable with all the tone markers and understood all the tone markers. And then when I was learning other languages that did not have tone markers, but I was having tone issues with, well, I would use the tone markers from Pinyin on whatever language I needed in order to help myself properly remember the tone. I made a video in reference to this in Filipino with magandang umaga, where when it's written out, it looks like umaga, but it's umaga. So I would use a tone marker from Mandarin above the A to remind myself about that tone. And PLC, back to Hindi and Spanish, Español, and actually a lot of languages, Hellenic, Greek is another one. There's a tone marker that is just indicates that that syllable is held a little bit longer. It just looks like a slash up that way. It simply means hold that syllable just a tiny bit longer than the others to help your intonation. And when I was looking at Hindi Pinyin after doing Mandarin, Spanish, Filipino, one thing that was a little bit confusing to my eye as an English speaker going that way was how many A's there was. Respectfully, we don't have that many A's in a row in English generally, but again, this is very personal to me. A step I took and am continuing to do on my own papers is, instead of writing the double A's, I put one A with that accent marker. It shortens up the words. I still know that tone marker means I gotta hold that a little longer. And obviously, anybody that has been viewing my videos knows I do not present it that way. I try to remain respectful in my presentation. But on my personal study sheets, there's A's with that accent marker on it. It's the only accent marker I ever put in my Hindi, because it's the only accent marker I really need in my Hindi, because other than the A's, it's a lot like English too, except the sentence structures. But PLC, Muli, that reminded me a lot of Filipino, but Filipino and Hindi still don't really have as much sentence structure differences to English as Mandarin. So, 在此, it was very important in my linguistic development that I did English and Mandarin first, because I've been able to apply what I've learned from doing the polar opposite of my mother tongue. Well, I've been able to apply that to lots of other languages that have been closer to my mother tongue in characteristic. But again, I think if you do speak Hindi, you would understand that perspective. Or if you speak Spanish or Greek or any of the languages that use that tone marker in that way. So now if you picture English, Spanish, and Hindi, Hindi would look more like Spanish and Greek by simply adding one tone marker and taking away some of those A's, because that is what that tone marker basically does, from my understanding of it. So, thank you for accepting that perspective maturely. I understand that I'm speaking about people's mother tongues, but I am very much so trying to respectfully help us save some mother tongues and not lose our mother tongues learning English, because it's not practical to consider there to be only one language spoken. Again, Angrezi सीखने के लिए धन्यवाद. 感谢学习英语. Salamat sa pag-aaral ng Ingles. Gracias por aprender inglés. And to everybody that doesn't speak Hindi, Mandarin, Filipino, or Spanish, thank you all for learning the English language, allowing us to continue to connect our world peacefully. Peace and love is in all of our human hearts. And now, with the development of a world understanding, we can get that understanding to a larger majority of the children throughout their lives. मेरे जीवन के लिए भगवान का शुक्र है. मैं व्यस्त मुझे जाना चाहिए. I'm busy, I gotta go now. आपकी इंटरेस्ट का शुक्रिया. Salamat sa iyong interes. Gracias por su interés. 谢谢你的关注. I love you all. Supi ko shanti. Belsi Bhagwan ka shukra hai. Alvida.